Welcome back to the Daily Carry Podcast, episode number 4. And boy, we've got a lot to talk about today, don't we?
Yes, sir. There's a lot happening in this world.
There is a lot, and it seems like every day it's just a little bit of a twist and a turn, and I'm sure that there's a lot of people out there that are wondering what's next.
I know, right?
Man, don't even really know where to begin, but I think probably one of the best places to start, because one of the first episode we really talked about wanting to make sure we kind of approach every single topic with knowing our limitations, our expertise,
Sure.
what we know, what we don't know. And it just so happens that this past Sunday, there was someone in an F-150 that acted with complete malice and had an absolute intent to kill as many people as possible, drove his F-150 through a church building and opened fire. And the reports that I've heard and seen so far is that it was over 100 rounds fired in this exchange. And thankfully, thank God, nobody was killed.
Right.
Except for
him.
Except for the shooter.
Yeah.
And he was killed by someone who they have said was on their security team.
Right.
Which is, this is your world. This is what you do. You do church. You don't call it security. You call it safety ministry, which I love. That's awesome. So I figure there's not a better place to start than letting you kind of speak to your thoughts on that and where we're at, what you think about what just happened at that church. Obviously, it's pretty impressive, the response time from their team and getting that threat no longer being a threat anymore. But that just definitely speaks to exactly what you're doing in churches and the need to be prepared.
Yeah. I can tell you Sunday morning when I looked down at my phone when it started going off, I was north of 30 texts in about 6 minutes. And, you know, these are all people that I've either trained with or worked with all around the U.S. And they're like, hey, did you see this? And the answer is, of course. You're pointing at something.
Yeah, I'm pointing at the lights because one of them is.
We lost a light. You know what? That is okay. we can turn that one off if need be. Yeah. We operate in a unique time, and one of the things that was said to me, and I have to be careful when we talk about some of this stuff as far as names go. But I can tell you there's a guy here in Colorado, very sourced individual high-end guy. One of the first things that he sent me, and I thought it was a very interesting point that was made. And anyway, it came off of X. Somebody was talking about live streaming events at churches and how dangerous they actually are in our modern society and how prevalent they are for the church and the need and the outreach and the discipleship. And, you know, you got some folks just will never enter into a church building, but yet they'll sit home and they'll watch a sermon online or a series online, whatever it may be. And you just never know who you're impacting. The problem is you have guys like this that take advantages of these live streams. And so did he know this? I don't know. Maybe it'll be in a manifesto, but my assumption is if you're wanting to make a statement, you want to make a statement to make a statement. And this guy clearly was not calculated. I would say it was probably a fairly impromptu deal. I don't know his backstory. I'm not going to speculate on his backstory. I would never do that. But to be that intentional about what you're trying to do with so little coordination. I mean, 100 rounds, and I think he hit one person in the leg. We call it spraying and praying back in the day. You just hope you hit something. Same thing happened down to New Life here. I think it was back like in 07, 08, whenever that took place. Matthew Murray came in and just mag dumping everywhere. And he unfortunately executed a couple people out in the parking lot very intentionally. But once he got inside the church, I mean, we went inside that church. I've looked at the video. I knew the director of security. I've trained guys down there. There were holes in the ceilings, walls, floors, plants, through and throughs. And, you know,
the person who ended up shooting that shooter here in New Life in Colorado Springs.
Yeah.
That was a lady, wasn't it?
Yeah, she hit him, and he ended up taking his own life after that. So she didn't put him down, and she helped slow the threat. She didn't stop the threat.
So what's crazy is that lady, not very long before there, was actually baptized at my dad's church.
Oh, is that right?
For those listening who don't know, my dad's pastor.
Yeah, Jeannie Assam is her name.
Yeah, exactly. She was baptized in my dad's church just a little while before that. And my dad was still pretty connected with his ministry team with her, and definitely shook her up. I think that it probably helped a little bit knowing that, you know, he ended up being the one who took himself out, and it wasn't really ultimately her.
Yeah.
But no doubt about it, she did the right thing. I mean, you have to eliminate the threat whenever it's threatening life, and you're in fear for your own life, but also there's an obligation for so many other lives that could have otherwise been destroyed if what was necessary wasn't done.
Yeah, and that's I think it's an important topic to talk about. I mean, we get it, you know, and I don't want to rabbit trail far, but we get it when gals come in for self-defense training all the time. They're like, "Oh, I'm not sure I can do this," and they get out there and they find out what we're actually teaching, and it's, you know, they've done something in the past, some kind of one-trick pony or 5-step program, and they get out here and they find out real world self-defense, like what you actually need to defend yourself and protect yourself. And you're not walking around in doom and gloom and looking over your shoulder. You're actually very empowered and you feel good. And you walk out of these classes like, man, I had no idea what I was walking into. But that to me is the same. I translate that by comparison in the church safety ministry world. You can have a security team and you can have guys that, you know, are very tactically proficient. We got a lot of former military, current military, law enforcement, that type of thing. But I would say 80% of the teams that I've trained are your average, everyday. I'd go everything from mom and pop to business owner to corporate guy to I've even got a couple high-end government officials that serve, which surprises me a little bit in their role, but they understand unprecedented evil and the need to stand in the way of it. So this thing that happened in Wayne County, that's my old stomping grounds, ironically. I mean, I spent a lot of years, I lived in Michigan, and that place is not far from where I grew up. Sounded like it was an isolated deal. Sounded like he had attended that church at least at some point. They at least recognized him. I don't know if he was a congregant, but, you know, it just shows how fast this stuff can happen. And I think about this often. I was driving downtown Castle Rock. If you guys, you know, anybody from around here knows all too well the B&B Cafe. And I was just thinking about it the other day. I mean, there's 30 tables outside of that cafe right on the street corner. And you hate to think doom and gloom, but it does concern me when people are out there just enjoying a breakfast on a Saturday morning, and the next thing that can happen is a hard right turn. And that's essentially what this guy did. He picked the church, drove the truck in, started dropping rounds as hard and as fast as he could. I'd love to see the video footage. I've not seen that yet of the inside if they have it, but I'd love to see how the security guy handled it, if he was poised and was able to kind of walk.
Did you see the video of the live stream?
I saw the live stream,
so
but I
the
did
live
not
stream,
see that.
you kind of can hear the muffled shots in the background, and obviously everybody in the building, they know. The thing with the live stream is obviously they have their audio tapered and catered to be able to pick up what it's supposed to pick up, and that is, you know, what's on the stage, what's on the platform. So you can't even really hear the audience that well.
Right.
But yes, I'm very interested in seeing if there is any other. There hasn't been any that I've seen released so far.
No, not yet.
But you know, I don't know, maybe security footage. I mean, the whole ordeal is pretty crazy. Driving the truck through, jumping out, and just spraying and praying, like you said. That's pretty wild. And
that's why I want to see where the security guard was it, you know, that type of engagement. I've said this all along. When I say all along, I'm talking I'm going back 25 years ago when I first started training guys in the church world, long before Columbine, any of this stuff. We moved out here in June of 2000. I was training in 94. Let me get that straight. 94, 95, 96, 97, South Carolina. I had trained, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 churches down there. Kind of a pro bono thing, just going around. Hey, we had a couple incidents that had happened over at a high school. They were near a church. People were like, what happens if it bleeds over into the church? This was before any of this stuff was like mainstream or popular, as we say. And I remember sitting down at the time in the very first discussion with the very first pastor and elder board, and they looked at me and they said, we're not worried about the guys coming in with guns. We're worried about what happens in the back end of the church, because there's a prison down the road, and people always correlate what they don't understand with a lot of things that are bad. And I loved the attitude and the approach they had, because they basically said, hey, we're worried about potential domestic situations or missing kids or even a pedophile situation. We had a congregant that came from a different church who was abused as a kid. So we're worried about catching that kind of stuff. We're not worried about the guy with the gun, because we think we can spot him pretty easy. Do we have a plan yet? No. Do we have people that are prepared? No. But we think we could spot that. And I loved it when he said it, because it's exactly my attitude. The guys with the guns are easy. They're the things that get the loudest bark, and they get the most attention and the biggest uproar and the biggest scream from both sides of the political aisle. But at the end of the day, if I'm standing in my local grocery store and a guy comes walking in with a gun shooting, everybody in the store knows it. The guy walking in who's ill-intended to grab a kid, but's got a smile on his face and he's got a shopping cart and he's throwing stuff in there and he looks like every other shopper, but he's evil, unprecedented evil. Those are the hard ones to catch. They're much harder to see the body language. So, the guy with the gun is easy, and it sounds like the security guard did a jam up job. And again, I'd like to see it. I'd like to see if he was under fire when he put the round down range, or if he was, under kind of cover concealment or something. But it'd be interesting to see that.
Very interesting. Obviously, it's very limited what's been released so far. But for there to be 100 rounds, it doesn't sound and it doesn't seem like it was a very long exchange. So it must have been very much so rapid fire.
Yeah.
And I texted you that my assumption, I don't know. And I'm just making a general assumption. We'll see what evidence comes out. We'll see what's actually released. But we very recently had a ruling on a legislation about a categorization, I guess I should say. There was a ban on what's called FRT, forced reset triggers.
Right.
And what that is whenever you pull the trigger, it forces the trigger to the reset position. So you don't have to pull it and then let it go yourself. It forces it to a reset.
Right.
Which is still technically not fully automatic.
Right.
And there was this whole lawsuit about, obviously the ATF wanted to say, no, that's definitely a machine gun. That's a machine gun. And obviously they've gone after, binary triggers, bump stocks, things like that, to try to continue to have this just growing blanket that they keep quilting together to say, no, that's also what we consider this. But the company, Rare Breed Triggers, actually won the lawsuit.
Right.
Because it's very much true that the ATF's categorization and definition of a fully automatic weapon is not an FRT.
Right.
An FRT actually has a trigger that resets.
Right.
The ATF's categorization and definition of fully automatic is one pull, multiple rounds.
Right.
An FRT is multiple pulls, multiple rounds.
That is correct.
And so the very first thing that I thought, man, there's 100+ rounds that went off. We're obviously looking at some kind of probably a device where it was helping this person, this shooter, shoot multiple rounds quickly. Very first thing I thought is that was probably an FRT.
Yeah.
Why? Because it just doesn't seem uncommon whenever there's these battles that go on legally, and with the ATF trying to say and obviously the left side of the aisle, the far side left of the aisle, trying to be very anti-rights as far as our guns go. It's not uncommon to see something happen like this, where those exact same devices that were just now fought over legally, now we're seeing them in a mass shooting, or we're seeing them in some kind of a very public spectacle of event.
Right.
And I don't know. I'm just speculating. But, I mean, if the evidence comes out and says that there was an FRT on this shooter's weapon, that is going to be pretty crazy.
Yeah, it will.
And we'll have called it out on this podcast.
Yeah.
Maybe probably before anybody else. I don't know.
It's interesting because if you bring anybody in here that does any kind of weaponry, any SF guy, they can sit down and give you all the pros and the cons and the ins and the outs. What concerns me about a lot of these things you mentioned House bill. So I go back in time a little bit. And if you're here from Colorado and you know who it's Diane or Diana DeGette, she's up in Denver. She made a claim on video one day. She says the reason that we need to take, she kept calling them clips. So the reason we need to take these clips or these magazines and we need to make them low capacity is because there's too many bullets in these clips. And if you have a clip with a whole bunch of rounds and you shoot it, you can kill, way too many people. So we need to reduce it because after the clip is shot, you throw it on the ground, you throw it away. We want to make sure that we're not selling high capacity clips. I'll never forget that when she said it. And it just, I hate to use the word ignorance and that because that's an uneducated thing on her part, obviously, but it's a deal where anybody in the gun world obviously knows you're reusing your magazines all the time. But the fight was, as she stood up on Capitol Hill in front of the cameras, was we got to get rid of these high capacity clips because they're carrying too many bullets. And once they're pitched, we feel better about it. And that is the people making the law. That right there is the concerning part. So when you have groups that are going in and having to defend themselves legally, or the NRA or any 2A company, it's very interesting because the challenge starts long before the argument that you're really going into it over because of stuff that is said like that. I mean, when she threw that out, I mean, I hate to say it, but she was the laughing stock of the gun world at the time. But again, ignorance, uneducated on it. I'm sure somebody came up and corrected her later, but there's a lot of that stuff. And people hear that and they think, oh, that's exactly the problem. Like, oh, we got to go fix that. And it's not only is it not a problem, it's not even a thing. So I'm guessing you're probably right. There's something along that line, in the auto element of this thing. That's a lot of rounds he threw downrange. Now, to be fair, I've only seen the one video piece and it does cut out because their mics are obviously dedicated to the people up on stage and you don't hear a lot of background noise, same way we would do in here. So you don't hear people rolling over there or noise outside. So I don't know how much we're going to get out of this thing, but I'm hoping that there's different camera angles that we can review.
You and me
this.
both. I think that this is the benefit of any time and whenever something like this happens is if we take it a step back and we look at it from the tactics point of view,
right,
is we can better prepare ourselves.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form it's good for any of these things to happen. It's not at all. But we can take a look at it and see what was done well. We can see what was done that could have been done better.
Sure.
And we can definitely prepare ourselves should we ever find ourselves in a similar situation. But just in my limited perspective here, for there to be 100 rounds reported to have been fired and one person got hit in the leg and the only person dead is the shooter, there had to have been something causing the rate of fire to be pretty quick, because if you're shooting semi-automatic, usually that means you're actually aiming and you're trying to destroy whatever you're aiming at.
Sure.
If you've put that many rounds downrange, you probably aimed in a general sense, but you probably just bullets going downrange and your recoil's going out of control and you just hoping something hits.
Right.
Right. That's just what I know about the situation so far is that's what makes the most sense to me, is there had to have been some kind of a device that was allowing that shooter to shoot rounds quickly.
Yeah.
And obviously, thankfully, that device didn't even matter.
Right.
It probably would have been more deadly if that shooter was shooting semi-automatic.
Yeah. You make a good point. Then I also look at I'm just grateful that this was not well thought out. I'm grateful that they had a team in place to be able to confront it. I think every church, school, soft target in America, hospital should all have them nowadays. The argument of get rid of the guns is like getting rid of cell phones. It's just, it's never going to happen. You have hundreds of millions, and proper training, proper understanding. We can really deep dive into this. Start looking at your active shooters, active killers. Look at your history. Look at who they're registered with. I don't know the actual numbers, but somebody told me at one point, I think it was Colion Noir. Is that how you say his last name?
Yeah, I believe so.
I think and forgive me, sir, if you're watching and I misquote you, but I want to say he threw out a stat a couple of years ago now that out of all of the active shooters / killers that have been reviewed, interrogated, investigated, and or researched after their death. I think there was 3 that had an NRA certification out of millions of people that have NRA certifications. And out of all of them, there was only a couple people that actually even had a CCW, concealed carry permit. So that's a pretty staggering number, because at the end of the day, that tells me that your law-abiding citizens are not the ones going out in not only not in the majority of the time, but even in the minority of the time. And we're talking an anomaly, a speck on a speck. And it's sad that we've even got to talk about this stuff in the first place. But I go back to, well, there's a lot of events. If Colonel Brian Searcy, buddy of mine, was on right now, we've talked this over a lot. He's a tactics guy, military guy, high-end guy, retired now, but we were sitting down talking about Beslan, Russia, that happened in April of 2004. Here in America, we used to call them Columbine-style events. So after Columbine happened, and then you had all these other active shooters and active killings happen, we had another Columbine-style event. What a lot of people fail to understand is over in Beslan, Russia, Chechen rebels, along with, at the time, unknown, but they believe kind of first-generation ISIS, went into a Russian-controlled school in the middle of Spetsnaz territory. So the greatest, essentially the elite Russian counterforces could not stop these guys. And they went in and they just executed kid after kid after kid after kid. And it made no news. Most people here in America would have never even heard of Beslan, Russia. Yet if you sit down and you research it a little bit, it is a staggeringly horrific event that took place, calculated, well-intended. And unlike this idiot Sunday that went in and drove a truck into a church, I'm sure his intent was to do as much damage as possible, and he probably did bigger damage to the church than he did to the people in the church, thankfully so. But at the end of the day, push comes to shove, these guys are out there, and this is the kind of stuff, it happens fast. When we talk about why be prepared, why carry a gun, why do you do your everyday carry, why do you fill in the blank. I don't walk around with a gun in the small of the back or the hip or apex or a knife on my body looking to kill somebody. I've never even endorsed those words. The term we use is stop the threat. We're there to stop the threat. And that might mean incapacitating. That might mean physically stopping the threat. It might mean putting them on the ground and choking them out. Or in this particular case, the security guard had to step up on unprecedented evil, and the guy's throwing lead downrange. You're going to step up and do what you got to do. I don't think a lot of Americans understand that. I don't think people think that way. They just categorically don't think that way. And the guys that do, a lot of people, they think they come off as fringe or weird or crazy. And I'm not saying there's not some that are out there. I would never defend that we don't have a handful of nut jobs out there, but on either side of the political aisle, you're going to have some extremes. But if I'm looking at the everyday concealed carry guy, gal, who really genuinely believes in the Second Amendment, the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Ninth Amendment, the 14th Amendment, on and on and on, really understands Bill of Rights, genuinely went through the training, these people are not only not the people not creating the problems, these are your best citizens that you have, because these are the people that you need in that moment. And again, I don't know this security guard. He could have high-end training, he could have military background, he could have a lot of things, but I would go out on a limb right now and say I bet he's none of those things. My guess is he's probably somebody who got some training, was volunteering on a security detail, and stopped a threat. And that's what most churches are comprised of.
So interested to see those details as they come out, because there's lots of things that I would like to know. What was the shooter shooting? What was the security team armed with? Right. I've been to some churches that they have rifles.
Yeah.
I've been to some churches that they're ready, like ready.
Yeah.
Obviously, the majority of churches are just going to be armed with probably a couple of guys that are on the team that have a concealed carry permit,
right,
and they've got a handgun that they're carrying. And hopefully they're trained well and they're ready to only use it under a very specific set of circumstances. In this instance, with there being as many rounds reported as, which obviously this is just what we've read. I don't know. There hasn't been necessarily, I guess, really any confirmation of how many rounds were shot. But if there were 100 rounds or more shot, then obviously there was some reloads.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to believe that there would have been anybody equipped with 100-round mag capacity.
You'd have to have a big barrel.
Unless this was a low caliber weapon, then maybe we would have had some options for larger magazine capacity. But with 100 rounds, really even with most lower caliber weapons, you would have had to have a reload or two.
Yeah.
I mean,
still a lot of finger pull.
Most you're looking at, like, I know that there's a couple of drums out there that you can get for 5.56, for 2.23, for which would be what fits most AR-15s.
Yeah.
You can get those in, I believe, 50. I think that there might be a couple of drums out there that are up to 100.
Yeah.
But most people are not going to choose that.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea what this. Obviously, this shooter was not a very intelligent person, anyways. Obviously, he was somebody who didn't really probably think this or plan this out very well. But driving through a church, getting out, opening up, I think it'll be very interesting to see if this person who ended up stepping up to this, stopping the threat, be interesting to see his background, to hear what his background is, if any, but also if the footage, or even if there is no footage, what the story is, if he can share his account, and hopefully sooner than later. That way we know exactly what happened, because what I would imagine probably happened as this guy is shooting and just spraying rounds, that whoever this person is who ended up stepping up to the plate and taking this threat out probably saw him maybe reload once, maybe twice, and as soon as he dumped the rest of his rounds on the last one, he probably knew, this is my opportunity.
Yeah.
That's just what I would go to, as far as like what I would just assume right off the bat.
Yeah.
Because obviously this guy was just, like you said, spraying and praying.
Yeah.
I would assume that whatever he was shooting, he probably had to reload a couple of times.
I would think so. And, I mean, if you've ever gone out on the range, and I think every gun guy's done this at least once in his life, where he's gone out on the range and he's like, all right, we're just going to seriously bang some lead today, and let's see how fast we can go and get it on target. It's one of those things where you waste, $50 worth of ammo once because you want to go out and just feel that experience, just really let loose. It's really hard to stay on a 12 by 12 inch target, just slapping as hard as you can. I mean, you got to be pretty darn proficient. My guess is if there's a couple different things. So I'd go back to New Life when Matthew Murray walked in. It was a very fortunate weekend because it was the kids' weekend. They were gone. The kids were actually, the whole youth wing was empty because they were on a retreat. So he entered the door of the very people that he wanted to kill, only to find out that he didn't do his research and they weren't there. So when he came in, he ended up coming down a hallway to where the youth wing would have been full, would have been thousands of kids, because New Life is a massive church. Instead, there were dozens of people, not thousands. And so I don't know the situation here. I don't know what he drove into. Haven't seen it. Obviously we're only speculating at this point, but I've Dave Grossman, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, he and I, man, we've gone back some years, had an opportunity to speak on stage with this guy, read his books, psychologist, military guy. He is the foremost expert, in my opinion, on active shooter research, active killer research in America. Dave is the real deal. He's cut from the salt, and he will tell you, he said it standing next to me on stage in front of thousands of people. You have seconds at best, seconds. And that's after you get by the paralysis and by analysis and what's going on and evaluating your sight picture and If you fill in the blank, if you're a shooter, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, you got a few seconds max to be able to find sight picture at a distance, through a crowd, maybe over the top of people, especially like in a church setting where you have multiple people at the same height, sitting in pews, sitting in seats, maybe even walking around a congregation, and you got somebody on the opposite side of the room, and you might be the only guy in there who's prepared to be able to meet that threat. So when Dave talks about this stuff, and the Colonel does a good job on it, he paints a picture of not only how fast it happens, but the unprecedented evil behind it for that person to get there. And they don't care. So when they're walking through the door, it's not a live or die thing for them. It's a victim count. That their sole objective right now, much like the caliphate, is very much, I'm ruling in my favor of what I want to do, and I'm controlling this environment as long as I can. The one thing that they don't want to do is they don't want to be captured. That's clear, because most of these guys end up offing themselves. At the end of the day, if they don't get shot or taken down, most of them end up committing suicide after they've done what they want to do. And I think that for the average person, that's the reason for being prepared, because this person's they're not going home. They're not walking in and leaving. That's not what this was about. If you go back to the Aurora movie theater massacre, he wasn't going home. He rigged his entire apartment to blow up he was going to level the entire city block. So there was no intent to go home. He knew exactly what he was walking into, and most of these guys know that stuff. There's a psyche behind this, and Dave Grossman, again, and I forget if he's a psychologist or psychiatrist. I'll probably screw that up, so forgive me, Dave. But highly educated guy, and he has traveled the world on these events. So he's been over to Norway on the big one over there. I mean, all of them. And he is, if you ever want a good read, pick up any one of his books, Hillology, any of them, and you will find out what it's really like to research and investigate these people. He's gone in with guys that have shot people up and gone to prison, and he's gone and sat down and interviewed them when they got captured. And he's like, walk me through this, help me to understand. And it's genuinely a fascinating read and study with where these guys come from. Most of them are just straight up evil, really want to just do a body count, don't intend on going home. But there are some that are a little bit more calculated. Clearly, this guy in Wayne County wasn't.
And thank God for that. Thank God for that, because whenever you hear a story like this, for someone like me, someone like you, this is a win. This is a win for people who prepare themselves.
Sure.
Why? Not because there was a person who was evil and destroyed church property and shot at least one person, injured them in the leg, but at least they survived, thank God. But because there is evil in this world, no matter which way you look at it.
Right.
And because of that, the reason that I say this is a win is because you see this, instead of it being on the headlines, 10 dead in mass shooting,
right,
we have 1 dead,
right,
in church shooting, and that was the shooter. That is definitely a win for being prepared, for being armed yourself, for having people and systems in place to defend yourself, defend people around you. That is a win for people like you and me, and people like us around the world who want to make sure that we're standing up for our families and those around us. There's no reason in any instance, in any way that you look at this, where there shouldn't have been that person in that church armed, ready to do what was necessary.
Right.
And very quickly, because there wasn't any killings, anybody killed in this instance, I think very quickly we'll see the narrative shift somehow, some way from some of the media that it's still about gun control.
Sure.
Got to get these guns out of these people's hands. But what the focus really needs to be, the right guy had a gun this past Sunday at that church in Wayne County, Michigan. The right person had a gun.
Yeah. And
that's what the story is.
I not only did you hit the nail on the head, I want to hit it with a sledgehammer for a second at the risk of maybe even irritating a couple of people. But this is something that I get very impassioned over. And it's not because of my daily carry. I get impassioned over it because of what I did in law enforcement. And there is no feeling. You can't talk me out of this. Nobody's ever going to convince me otherwise. So I'm just going to double down on it. There is no feeling that you can experience that relates to going to a family, knocking on the door, and letting them know that somebody died. There's nothing. Because it's not like being people like, well, what about the hospital when the doctor has to come out? It's not the same thing, because you already know that the tragedy has happened. You're there in the hospital. You're waiting. You're hoping for good news. When you've got to go knock on the door and say your teenage daughter isn't coming home tonight, because fill in the blank, whatever the blank is, doesn't really matter. The circumstance isn't so much the situation is telling that parent, having them fall into your arms, having them hit you, having them attack you, having them scream at you, yell at you, all the emotions you could imagine that would come out of an emotional driven parent in the moment when they're getting that kind of tragic news. And I've had to do it 3 times in my career, only 3 times. And I know guys that have had to do it more. I've only had to do it 3 times. I can unequivocally tell you it's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Bar none, there's not even a close second. And I've had some pretty egregious stuff happen in my life. Some pretty bad things happen with family, et cetera, et cetera. There is nothing harder than that. And the reason I bring this up, and because when people go to gun control and they're like, oh, we got to get guns out of the hands of people. Okay, well, take steering wheels out of the hands of people. Take cell phones out of the hands of people. And here's the reason why. Look up stats. Take guns off the table for a minute and look up how many people were killed by texting and driving last year. Take texting and driving off the table and look at DUIs. Take DUIs off the table and start looking, and just keep filling in the blank. So texting and driving, is it 100% preventable? Yes. DUIs, 100% preventable? Yes, absolutely. Guns going out into public, 100% preventable? Sure. Anybody can make a choice to not take a gun and go out into public. Here's the however factor. People are not going to do that. Evil exists. Bad things exist. People do stupid stuff. So we have law enforcement for a reason. We have concealed carry for a reason. We have a Second Amendment for a reason. We've got people that are going to take a stand in the presence of evil. But what about the couple driving down the roadway and the person's texting and driving, coming at them on a double lane road, drifts over the roadway and hits them head on? Where's the rage? Why are we not banning cell phones? Why are we not prosecuting? And so, these are the types of things for me that it's easy to focus on the gun when the narrative is being screamed essentially from the left in this country of these things are evil. Well, let's stop and compare for a second, just for a second, and I'll get off my rabbit trail. How many posts, because there's no way to quantify this, how many posts out of ego, arrogance, pride, anger, frustration are thrown out in volatility every single day on social media at another human being that somehow potentially impacts that person's life? I bet there's billions upon billions of people saying something every single day, commenting on something every single day that is non-productive, non-helpful in any way, shape, or form. How many people did we have shot yesterday? How many guns got up out of the safe, walked out into the middle of, of whatever and shot somebody? None. How many people picked up a gun and went out and shot people? I don't know. A handful, maybe. Worldwide, maybe a handful. We hear about this thing in Wayne County, Michigan, and this guy went in and did the thing that he did. And in the same day, billions of people attacked other people through cell phone usage, through social media accounts. And the reason I'm passionate about this is because we've lost so much critical thinking, so much control in society of our own thoughts, our own actions. We just get into this conjecture pissing contest with other people. And then when you have a hot button topic that pops up like this, where a guy drives a truck through a church, goes out and opens fire, everybody's like, oh my gosh, gun control. I'm like, well, where were you at 5 minutes ago when somebody was screaming about fill in the blank and destroying somebody's life, or somebody was using AI to generate naked pictures of some poor girl who was dating somebody, and the next thing you know, her life is ruined, she committed suicide, and the family's damaged forever? I mean, there's just so much that we could focus on. There's so much bad, so much evil, but there's also a lot of good, and there's a lot of amazement. So to me, this podcast, the Daily Carry, is really about what we carry on our person. Sure, it's about a blade and it's about a gun, but it's far more about carrying your cross. It's far more about how you treat people and edify people and love on people and walk a journey with people. And if you have to, stand in the presence of evil of people that do things. And, that's my rabbit trail. It bothers me to great extent that we live in a place where I know I can't stop any of these things that I just mentioned on social media. There's no way I'm going to go out and do a post and the whole world's going to wake up and go, wow, Micah, that was brilliant. We'll never say anything mean ever again to anybody, or we'll never do anything that taunts or challenges or mocks or does anything. It's never going to happen. Nor are you going to, and I'll look right in the camera and say, you're never taking away the guns. It's never going to happen, because you have too many people that realize the importance of self-protection. And self-protection goes in a lot of directions, but ultimately it might come down to a piece of lead like we had in Wayne County. And I don't know if the guy took 1 shot, 2, or 10 that was in the security team, but it sounded like it was 1, and it sounded like it stopped the threat. And to your point, yeah, that's a win. And I hate to say, you got to kill somebody to get a win, but at the end of the day, do we want the guy driving through the church to shoot 20 and run over 15? Or do we want the guy driving through the church to get stopped immediately? And that, to me, is the victory.
Overcome evil with good. And I believe that's exactly what we saw happen in Wayne County, Michigan. Might be controversial. There's a lot of people that are not going to agree with me. But I believe unequivocally that the person who stopped that threat stopped evil from evil's intent to destroy and to kill so many more that were there for what reason? For truth, for God, for good. So this is such a perfect place to pivot a little bit to another discussion that I know you're very passionate about, because obviously we have law enforcement for a reason. We don't know the background of this person who stepped up to the plate and took out this threat in Wayne County, Michigan. Maybe he was law enforcement, maybe he wasn't. But many security teams, many safety ministry teams in churches, they're just regular people. Yeah. They're regular people that have volunteered to receive some level of training and to be prepared if they're needed in a situation. And that is so important. There's going to be some listeners, there's going to be some people out there that are like, well, no. We should just let only law enforcement do the job.
Oh, man, I can speak into that heavily.
Of course you can. Yeah. Because this is not from me. This is from Micah, and I am taking this straight from his mouth. It's gone into my ears, and it's coming out of my mouth now, is this need to get away from the term first responders. Because what law enforcement, what EMTs, what the fire department, what they're going to be is really the emergency responders.
That's right.
And it's on our shoulders as everyday people who are carrying what we are meant to carry daily. Especially, this has got to hit home with people who are carrying what they're supposed to carry, and they're carrying what's most important to carry, and that is their cross, is that we are the first responders.
Yeah.
We are the first ones on scene. Something happens right in front of us. How are we carrying ourselves, and what are we going to do with what we are carrying? We have to make sure that we're not just passing the buck to somebody else, that we're not just saying, oh, somebody else is going to take care of this. And I go back to, we talked about this on another episode already, the instance in Boulder where this guy is literally throwing fire at elderly people, Molotov cocktails, just throwing fire. Nobody does anything. People stop and they get their phones out and they can record, they can video this, but nobody does anything. If there was somebody there that was carrying what they were supposed to carry, and they were carrying it with the right attitude, there's no excuse whatsoever that threat could not have been stopped from causing as much damage as it did cause.
Yeah.
And I think this is a perfect opportunity to kind of pivot the conversation to that, is that it's not all on law enforcement's shoulders. Right. It's not all on emergency responders' shoulders. There has to be everyday citizens of America. We've been given the rights that we've been given for a reason, and it's not to just say somebody else can do it, but it's to step up to the plate and have the attitude of what I love the saying, ask not what your country can do for you, but what can you do for your country?
Yeah.
And that doesn't start by something big and grandiose and massive. It doesn't have to be that you saved the entire United States of America. It's just your own community, your own world, within your realm of influence. What can you do to step up to the plate and serve? Be that first response, that first person on scene. If something happens, you're ready. You're ready to do what's necessary. You're ready to step up to the plate and make sure that evil's not going to overcome the good around you and the good in you, but you're going to let the good within yourself overcome that evil.
Dude, I could say I've got like 47 thoughts going through my head of everything you just hit, and I'll try to just bullet point them quick. So to clarify something, anybody can be a first responder. Cop, firefighter, paramedic. If they're first on scene, they're first responder. The reason I have pushed back on this as a retired peace officer, medic, I would say, I don't know the percentage, but I'm going to put it into the highest 90 percentile of calls that you're on are often things that you're dispatched to. Very seldom do you roll up. I mean, I've known a few medics that have rolled up on car crashes, but most get dispatched. And so, tones drop, you're in the station, bam, you jump in the truck, you fly over to the scene. You're responding emergent, right? You pull up. I've never pulled up as a medic and pulled up as a cop ever in my life. Not one time where I was dispatched to something where there weren't people already on the scene. So that's what we're talking about as first responders. We're talking about people that are pulling up, they're rolling up on this kind of thing. You're the everyday citizen driving on the roadway. Car crash happens in front of you, you get out. Whether you're medically trained or not, you're there. You can do something. Even if it's just making a phone call and transferring information to a dispatcher, you can do something. So we talk about first responders from that standpoint. The reason I say emergency responders is, again, it's a dispatch deal. You're coming in hot. The emergency is already underway. You're coming in to caretake for that. And I know that I've got people in my field that have pushed back. Well, Micah, here's why they said that. Well, that actually originated back in the day, and I'm sure I'm going to screw this up. I believe it was either Nancy Reagan or Barbara Bush, one of the two. I'll Google it. I'll look it up. she was making, one of them was making was having a speech and made that comment one day. Oh, we want to thank our first responders. And that's kind of where that thing originated, and it just took flight from there. I'm not looking to so much change the world on it, but it's just, I think it's helpful to have people acknowledge and understand that if you roll up on the scene, you've got an opportunity. And that opportunity that's sitting in front of you could be a life-saving opportunity. It could be a caretaking opportunity. There's a lot of different things that law enforcement specifically gets called for. I mean, we get called for barking dogs. Somehow that's the cop's job. It's not you as a neighbor to go over and knock on your neighbor's door and go, hey, I live next door to you. Your dog's out at night. It's kind of driving me crazy. Could we maybe do something about that? Instead, we've just gotten to a point where we don't communicate. Now we call the cops. Cops come over, and next thing you know, now we got a situation between two neighbors that are ticked off of each other because one didn't have the common courtesy. So that's a simple example, but at the end of the day, cops get thrown into a lot of things expected to fix them. So we do focus on the emergency response and first responder deal. The other element that you hit on, and you wouldn't know this, so you hit on it ironically. I go back to 07, 08. I will not name the insurance company out loud, but I will tell you there is a major insurance carrier in the United States of America that insures over 50,000 churches. And they insured a church that I was the director of security at. And when I came in, this was just post the New Life event. This is post Columbine. And this is when security teams at the time were becoming more and more prevalent, more and more popular in churches. Churches were realizing we need these people. Well, the insurance companies were dictating who could be on your team. And so we had an insurance carrier that said the only people you can use are current or retired military and law enforcement. And I thought that was very interesting at the time because clearly the underwriters for the insurance company are looking at the bottom line and the dollar count and what the payout is, but they're not looking at the law. And when you operate under the color of authority, it's okay to be on a security detail as a cop. The problem is if you have a crime that happens in your presence and you're law enforcement, you got to respond to that as a police officer, as a deputy sheriff, whatever it may be. What you can't do is go, well, I'm just going to ignore that, and I'm going to go over here on behalf of the church, and I'm going to do a church thing. So we sat down and with a team of underwriters for this insurance company and a couple division heads, and we actually rewrote the policy for every church in America through our church. We sat down and said, this is never going to work. You're never going to have just cops on a team because they can't respond as the way the church would want. Because you're going to have a lot of people who are going to walk into a church that has nothing to do with law enforcement at all. You might have an act of domestic in progress. You might have a restraining order violation or PTO or some other thing. You might have an active shooter in progress. But at the end of the day, if everything just becomes a law enforcement function, then the church has no responsibility, and the church ultimately becomes accountable because now you've got a bunch of people either on volunteer or contract that you've brought in that are law enforcement based, and the church is going to get a big black eye because the cops are going out just being cops because they have to based on what they're sworn to do. So we got the insurance company to rewrite the policy on how they did that and ultimately allow churches nationwide to be able to come in and go, oh, wait a second, we can just train people. Proper training, obviously, and we're going to partner with our law enforcement. That's very, very important. We want to partner with our firefighters. We partnered with federal agencies. I had the JTTF on board. I had FBI on board, ATF. We had a lot of guys that served in a role, that was their job, but they wanted to come into the church. So, yeah, you can have guys on the team, but your first priority as a peace officer here, at least here in Colorado, and I'm sure it's nationwide, is you have to act under the color of authority to stop a crime in progress. So, I bring that up simply because the insurance companies dictate a lot. And at the end of the day, the emergency responders, we still want them coming emergent, but we wanted true first responders on scene that could walk a journey with somebody, pray with somebody, disciple somebody. Maybe we had a marriage that wasn't a domestic situation, but maybe they were just struggling, and you don't want to turn that into a law enforcement matter. So it's very interesting that you brought that up because that is something that happened back in 07. And my then business partner who was passed on because cancer sucks, she was the one that was responsible for essentially affecting that change with this insurance company. And this is like affecting a change with State Farm or Allstate or Progressive. I mean, it was that big of a company. So very proud that we were able to get in there and do that and get that vernacular and that verbiage change, that we have legitimate first responders, to your point, that can serve the church and come in and also serve the people. And a lot of folks don't know that. A lot of people just assume it's all police or, military that are serving on these teams, and they're just not. The vast majority are not.
And it shouldn't be. It should be that at the end of the day, we all have a responsibility to each other.
Yep.
We have a responsibility, brother to brother, sister to sister, get shoulder to shoulder, make sure that we're standing together in the fight against evil. And obviously, I do believe in majority of that evil being not flesh, not something that we see every day. It's not like I'm saying that the only time that we see good fighting evil is with guns and knives, but I do think that whenever you have a situation like this, you see evil manifesting itself in the flesh.
Sure.
And that threat needs to be eliminated
Yep.
for the betterment of the rest of the people that are there, that are innocent, that are good, and there for a good reason. Obviously, I'm talking about the instance here in Wayne County further as I am talking about this, but first responders, that's something that I really agree with you, and I myself have become more and more impassioned about as we have continued to discuss, is that we can't just keep on passing it and acting like that it's not our responsibility,
Right.
because it is. We can go down a whole nother conversation. I know that we're kind of running out of time here. We're about to have some kids show up here, and I know that we're about to have a little self-defense class here in the next couple of minutes.
But that is a good segue, so keep talking because I'm going to make a point on the self-defense in a second.
Well, keep your thought, because I know you're going to have some more thoughts, because I was about to segue into talking about LifeSpot, which is an app that you're involved in and you know a lot more about than I do. But the whole idea behind LifeSpot, from what I understand, is really empowering people, individuals, to be more equipped and more ready to be that first responder, because the idea is an app, and you can have these apps. I know that it's become more popular in churches and schools, and basically you can activate it and you know that there's a threat here. Whatever the level of threat is, I'm not completely entirely familiar with everything in the app. You'll be way more educated on that than I am. But the reason that I really like the idea of LifeSpot is because regular people are most of the time already on scene. They're already on site, and it could be 3 minutes, it could be 15 minutes before you get an emergency responder to the scene.
Sure.
But it could be maybe we are in the same facility. Somebody triggers this LifeSpot on the other side of this building, and it just so happens that I'm there. I'm ready to do what's necessary if I need to, and I see it on my app because I have LifeSpot, and I know, whoa, this is in the same building as me.
Right.
I got to go see if I can help. Obviously, we don't want people just piling in and just there being crossfire between each other, but with some training and with some refinement, I really believe that has the potential to be the best thing that's happened in a world where there is more news reportings of people with guns, people with knives, people with Molotov cocktails attacking innocent people. Having a resource for people who are carrying, who are very much a part of the movement, the daily carry, carrying with responsibility, carrying with training, and carrying with the intent to de-escalate before having to get to the point that's necessary.
Right.
But there is still there's going to be instances in this world where evil has already made the decision to manifest itself, and there's no other option besides this person needs to be put down, or else he's going to continue to put other good people down.
Yeah.
And I believe that this LifeSpot app and the idea behind it really helps shift the perspective of we can't just wait for an emergency responder, because if we wait and it's 3 minutes or it's 15 minutes, but yet here I am or here somebody else is that is trained and is ready, could approach and deal with, eliminate the threat before that threat has continued to destroy or kill however many lives is between that window between an emergency responder arriving on the scene.
Right. Excuse me. Well, first of all, I'm very grateful that you brought it up. LifeSpot was developed here locally by a Denver full-time SWAT guy who's now retired by the name of Brett Titus. Brett and I, 15-second backstory, the irony, can't even make this up. Brett went to high school with my wife in Willis, Michigan, and lives here in Colorado. I meet Brett 7 years ago, and we're sitting down having a conversation after a speaking event I was at, and somehow we got onto where we grew up, and he mentioned it, and he said, I grew up in this little community called Willis, and I'm like, you were a rail splitter? And he's like, how do you know what a rail splitter was? And I'm like, I married one. And turned out that Brett knew my wife from high school. And I'm talking a graduating class of maybe 100 people. So little tiny town, small backstory to that. Very, very cool that we, connected 4.5 decades later down the road. But LifeSpot is, it was developed because Brett was tired of walking over dead kids. That's really what it came down to. I mean, that's his statement. And Denver's a full-time team, a lot of thousands of ops that he's been on, to include all of the big ones that happened out here in Colorado. And he said, we got to do something. We got to do something about the notification, about the response time, and truly about the comms in it. And so what it is very simply put, it's an app on your phone. You press it, you hold, you swipe for 3 seconds. You're in a geo-fenced area. So if it's a high school, a church, or whatever, and it sets off if you have an active threat in progress, meaning somebody with a weapon, shooting, stabbing, whatever it may be. We don't use it for weather or medical emergencies. It's dedicated for one thing and one thing only, and that is the active threat, the active killer. So the app goes off. It notifies everybody on the app in the geofenced area, to include law enforcement outside of the geofenced area, medics outside of the geofenced area, firefighters, command staff, and it all happens within 3 seconds. So we're working off of both of the major platforms, using the Amazon push because they have pretty much the greatest web push out there on the market. So we can run about 5,000 end users on the bandwidth of one YouTube video. It is instantaneous, and you can communicate via the app just like you would text somebody. Everybody's got their phone on them. So if you're in the school, shooting starts happening, you see the shooter, you swipe and hold 3 seconds, it sets it off. It gives the proximity of where the shooter is at. It shows every end user on the app. So if you have armed staff in the school, teachers, whoever's been facilitated as an end user in this thing, will immediately have, within 3 seconds, notification of where everybody is at. You can mark yourself as, let's say you're injured. You can mark injured on the app, so medics know where to find you because you're immediately located off your GPS in your phone, and we know where the shooter is now. And so instead of going in on a hunting mission or a fishing mission, now we're going directly to the threat instantaneously. The thing I love most about it is the speed and the awareness. So because everybody does carry a phone and everybody's savvy on phones nowadays, you pop this app up, you look at it, it speaks to you instantaneously. You don't have to be educated. And the training on this thing is under 3 minutes, honestly, on how to use it. And 3 minutes is on the high side. If you're the cop coming on scene, the great thing is it also triggers the fastest route for you if you're coming. So it gives you maps, it pops it up instantaneously, shows you your traffic route en route to the shooter, and it shows you the route to the shooter. So it's way cool technology, and it's just advancing at light speed. When Brett started this thing off, we were here local in Colorado. Now we're in 17 states and getting ready to go international. So amazing technology, very, very cool. Pennies on the dollar, inexpensive by comparison to anything else. We don't need metal detectors. We don't even need cameras. That's the best part about it. We can actually find and locate the shooter through GPS, through the phone systems and the network systems that we're on. So that's kind of the short version of it. The guy that created has got a heart of gold. I've known this guy now, as I said, for 7 years, and all I've ever seen from him is just the drive to get this into every school in America, into every government building, into every church, because it saves lives. And here's the great thing about it. People are like, well, have you had it used? Has it happened in real time? Yep. We've had 3 events, 3 notifications. 2 suspects were arrested within 60 seconds of the notification, both armed on property. And the other one had actually fired shots before somebody had set off the app. They set off the app. Law enforcement got into a chase. He opened fire on law enforcement, and he was the threat was stopped. Let's put it that way. So in all 3 circumstances, since this has been rolled out about 3 years ago now, the 3 times this has been needed, it worked flawlessly with 0 injuries, by the way.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That I firmly believe in that. I think that is just an incredible idea, and I think it's an incredible, useful It's one of the best ways of, in a world where we're just leveraging technology, cell phones, more than we ever have. That is just, it's a no-brainer.
It's so simple.
You gotta leverage technology in ways that save lives. There's no better example that comes to mind. If you can have hundreds of apps on your phone that are for AI, for social media, for whatever, it just seems like the responsible decision to have an app like LifeSpot on your phone ready, just in case you need it. Not even just for yourself. Obviously, it could be something that saves your own life, but also for just people around you.
Well, the neat thing about it, and because people have asked me, well, what happens when you go home? What happens if you butt dial? What happens? You can't. It's basically pretty foolproof. It only activates if you're the end user. So like the teachers or the staff, whatever, it only activates once you're in the geofenced area. So if you're driving home and you roll up on a car crash, you can't set off LifeSpot to get help. It doesn't work that way. You still got to dial 911. The thing that is great about it within the geofenced area is we can control that geofence deal in two different ways. One, everybody inside, we know where everybody is, including the shooter. And if people flee, once it's been activated, so let's say we have, like here in Douglas County, we've got a high school down the road, 1,500 kids. Somebody sets it off. Let's say 1,000 people decide to flee the school because they're looking at the app. They can see where the shooter is, and they go, well, pound sand, I'm not staying here. He's on the other side of the school. I'm getting out of here. The great thing is once the app has been set off, we can track every end user as far as they go. They can run from here to Istanbul. It doesn't matter. And our recover, then you don't have to have dedicated reunification points because as we know, post-Columbine, I mean, you got to go back 25 years ago now, and Columbine 26 years ago, I guess it was 99. So Columbine happened. Who's your generation of shooters now, realistically? These are all kids that have been trained on lockdown drills and what to do and da-da-da-da. Well, now the kids know where the good guys are at. The kids know where people are hiding inside the schools. So we have to keep updating our technology, which is, to your point, first responder versus emergency responder. Just a quick point for a lot of folks that don't know, if you've never listened to the Columbine audio tapes, which are available online, all you gotta do is listen to the first 2 minutes. You don't need to listen to anything after that, because what people don't realize is when Columbine happened, Columbine did not come out as an active killer or an active shooter. We didn't even have that term at the time, by the way. That originated after Columbine, but it did not come out as a shooting in progress. Most people had no idea. It came out as a grass fire. The very first report that was called in on 911 is we have a grass fire. The second report that came in is a dumpster fire, maybe even a dumpster explosion, and it was nowhere near Columbine. The third report that came in was a medical in the parking lot of Columbine. Not sure if it was related to either of the previous two 911 calls with the fire. And only at the minute 57 mark did somebody get on the radio and say, we've got a shooting inside the school.
Wow.
A minute 57. A minute 57, those two insane, evil human beings had been in there assassinating people. And pre-today's technology and response codes and the way we do it, back then it was call SWAT, surround the building, and man up. And, well, that was a travesty that should have never happened. But at the end of the day, you learn what you learn, a little too late in my opinion. But push comes to shove, when I go backwards in time, if LifeSpot had been there at that time, and there's no way to know, but I certainly would think, man, if we've got 1,000 end users in a school who can hit a button and hold it for 3 seconds, and we know where these guys are at and we can get to them, especially if we have armed security inside the school or school resource officers, your response time is going to go from, in Columbine's case, hours, right? This is age old now. But even in current technology, it's going to go from minutes down to seconds. And that's the difference right now. And that's why, to me, LifeSpot, as a former TAC guy and as a former TAC medic, I will tell you this. The one thing that I trusted was the rifle in my hand and the guy next to me and the training I had. That's what I used to trust. I finally have a piece of technology now that I go, wait a second. This actually takes all of that and puts it on steroids, supersedes anything that we ever learned. Now we can go directly to the threat. So all of that great stuff that I've got, the weaponry, the training, all of those things, now I've got a piece of technology with me that's going to take me immediately to where the bad guy is. Show me a cop that doesn't want to know where the bad guy is, because that's the first thing that happens is you want to get to the bad guy as fast as you can. So having this tech, go ahead and talk. I'm choked up.
Clear your throat. Well, we have just a couple minutes left, and we have obviously so much more that we can talk about, and we're going to have to save majority of it for the next episode. Obviously, since our last episode, we have gone to war and gone to peace, and apparently there was already a breach of the ceasefire this morning, from what I understand. So we've got a lot going on in the world.
We do.
And at the end of all of this, and at the end of this episode and every episode, what really matters is God, our relationship with God. Greater is He that is in us than he that is in this world. And with that, we're going to have another good discussion, hopefully just in another day or two.
Yep.
And we'll continue, kind of try to pick up where we are leaving off on this episode. But I signed us off on the last episode, so if you'd like to go ahead and give some people some hope, let's approach our great God and let's put a lot of this in His hands, because He can take a lot better care of it than any of us can.
Amen to that. All right, Father God, thank you for another opportunity to sit down with Jared this morning and discuss world events, world topics, and the fears that people have. But we know that we can cast those fears aside and put hope in You for eternal salvation. I put a lot of stock in my salvation, because at the end of the day, it is You that I want to focus on, and not just all of the bad stuff that's going on. But I also know that we are called to stand in the face of evil, and You gave us the abilities and the tools and the skill sets to utilize, and we are called to do that, and we feel led to do that, and that's what the Daily Carry is about. So I would ask that You be with the men and women that are emergency responders out there that are responding to hundreds of thousands of calls to service a day nationwide. Be with our frontline military people all around the world right now as tensions are high. And I would ask that You would be with every single person just walking in their daily carry, as they are also the legitimate first responders on any exigency that lands in their lap, and just give them the peace and understanding to be able to think in the moment and to be able to walk through this. And we ask all of this in Your Son's precious name. Amen.
Amen. All right.
All right.
We'll talk more soon.
Thursday it is.